Hi there, John Moore here. I'm a spiritual teacher from Maine. I teach shamanism, meditation, all kinds of stuff. Today, I want to talk to you about self love shadow work or doing shadow work to increase self love. Why is that important? Why is that a thing? Why do I recommend that everybody do shadow work, particularly if you're interested in personal development, spiritual development, anything along those lines? So, I will begin by defining some of the terms, and I promise by the end I will give you some practical things to do, some practical shadow work exercises. So hang on, stay tuned. But I need to give a little bit of background information because I don't know who you are and what your experience with this stuff is. So let's talk about the shadow. The shadow is a term coined by psychoanalyst Carl Jung for a part of ourselves or parts of ourselves that are exiled. Why are they exiled? They're exiled to our unconscious because it's really painful to look at them. We've been told they're socially unacceptable. We feel shameful about them. These include things that are wounds, our psychic wounds, things that have happened to us or our past traumas. They include our hidden desires. They include complexes about parts of ourselves that drive us crazy, things, aspects of our personality that drive us crazy that we often project onto other people. And I'm going to talk about projection in a moment and why that's an important clue as to what's in your shadow. So, the shadow is a part of ourselves, it's a complex of things, parts of ourselves that we have exiled because we don't want to look at them. The poet Robert Bly described the shadow as a black bag that we drag behind us. Why? Because our shadow parts are still active. They just happen to be in our unconscious. So they can act up in ways that are unexpected and undesired from our perspective. So they have, for example, um, are the things that we get triggered by, right? Somebody cuts me off in traffic and I get so angry I want to punch that person in the nose. Where is that coming from, right? Somebody, traffic stuff happens all the time. Why am I getting that upset? Right? That's coming out of the shadow. If you've ever done anything or ever said anything that you've regretted or feel shameful about, that's coming out of your shadow. If you've ever done something that was surprising, go, oh, why did I do that? That's not like me. We've all done things like that. Those are coming from your shadow. So, your shadow, whether you think so or not, and it's hard to see this because it is an unconscious complex, is running the show. It's running the show behind the scenes, like the guy in Wizard of Oz, like the wizard who's behind the curtain pulling all the levers and making the face talk and smoke come out and all of the things that the wonderful Wizard of Oz does. But it's just a little man behind the curtain. And it turns out, I believe the Wizard of Oz is a really shamanic story. Um, it turns out he can grant wishes, but the wishes are about powers that people already have. They already have the power within them to return home, for example. So, this is what the shadow is. Okay, briefly, that's what the shadow is. Now, let's talk a little bit about love and self love. And you might think you know what love is, but it can get really confusing. See, in the English language, we have the word love, but in Persian, for example, there are 85 different words for love. So the word in English is used for all kinds of things that can cause some confusion, right? If I say, I love you to my children, that is different than if I say, I love you to my lover. If I say, I love cheeseburgers, that's very different than what I'm saying when I love my children, hopefully. And so it can mean everything from, I feel emotionally connected to you, to I'm intimate with you, to I have a really positive reaction to the flavor of this food. That's why it can get confusing. So, on a spiritual level, when we are talking about love, we are talking about complete acceptance, a complete lack of rejection. So, unconditional self love is I accept all parts of myself, even those parts that, you know, I, might have preferred to come up in a different way. All right. But our shadow keeps a lot of our parts hidden, keeps them locked into a shame complex. It's shameful to look at that. It's shameful, right? Um, and so unconditional love, when we're talking about unconditional love, spiritual love, we're talking about utter acceptance. You can hold a person, you can hold another being, you can hold yourself in complete acceptance. This doesn't mean that extending unconditional love towards somebody means you accept harmful behavior from them. We're separating the person from the behavior, right? Those are different things. Somebody's behavior, their thoughts, yes, that's affects how we think of them very often, but we can remind ourselves that no matter what, we can love a person, even if we cut somebody out of our life because they're harmful to us. We can still accept them as a being, as a spiritual being, as a part, they're part of divinity. Now, we want that for ourselves. This is a key to psycho-spiritual health, honestly. Um, Self-love work is some of the best work you could ever do to maintain your health, your psycho-spiritual health. So how do we do shadow work specifically for self-love, particularly because the shadow means those parts of us are unconscious? Well, they're mostly unconscious, but sometimes they creep up. And this is how we start to do this work. Now, what Jung said was we don't reach enlightenment by imagining figures of light. We reach enlightenment by going into our shadow and making those parts of us conscious, right? So when we become conscious, when we become aware of these parts, we're not rejecting parts of ourselves. We become more whole. You are already whole. You're already whole, complete, and perfect. We just have this delusion of separation from our perfection. We have this delusion of separation from the rest of the universe, from divinity, all of these things. And so part of shadow work for self-love is working around that delusion to say, I am already whole. No matter what I've hidden these parts because it makes me feel like I'm broken, but I'm already whole, complete, and not broken at all. At my core, it's important to recognize that our spiritual self is divine. Our core spiritual self is a piece of divinity. It's unwoundable, it's unchangeable, it's unborn and undying. It's infinite and connected to all there is. So let's talk about how we start. I told you I was going to give you some practical ideas about how to start doing some shadow work for self-love. In a really easy way, so I recommend journaling and writing things by hand whenever you do any of this type of work. It helps us process things and you'll have a record of it. But when you do handwriting as opposed to typing things out, you're actually activating more parts of your brain and it helps to integrate this work. So one of the things are start to list the things that drive you crazy about yourself. What are some things? I procrastinate. I do this. I do that. Okay. Start to make a list of those things that drive you crazy about yourself sometimes. And understand that every behavior, every emotion, every belief that you have, whether it's coming from the shadow or whether it's purely, it's conscious, in your system or not, has a positive intention for you, right? um why might I procrastinate? What's a positive intention behind procrastination? Well, it thinks that the part of me that's procrastinating is putting off tasks that I hate, that that it associates with suffering, that it associates with not getting pleasure and getting pain and all of these things, right? Thank you to that part of me. Thank you for wanting that for me. Thank you for wanting me not to experience those harsh things. However, now I can have a conversation with this part that it's starting to become conscious. However, when I procrastinate, I know that that can exacerbate the pain down the road, that it can cause problems down the road because I've put off work and I might have to rush last minute to get it done, or I might not get it done, causing other implications. So while your intention is perfect, while your intention is unimpeachable, what is not perfect in my sight is the way that things are working out, the way that you have decided to work those things out. So let's work out some kind of arrangement. Okay, so that is one beginning way to start to do shadow work, is to understand that there's positive intention behind all of these things that drive you crazy. And even if you can't figure out what that positive intention is, give thanks to that part. Understand that there's a positive intention behind it, and it will transform your relationship to that part where that is putting that behavior out in front of you. So another piece of shadow work that I think is really, really important, and I mentioned projection before, things that we really don't like about ourselves that we have hidden in the shadow. Parts of us still want us to process those. So we project that stuff onto people. Oh, look at that person over there. They're procrastinating. They're so lazy, right? When we make those judgments about other people, we're projecting something about ourselves that we're uncomfortable about. It's not always a one-to-one relationship. This is where it can get really tricky, right? When I project something onto somebody so that I can disapprove of them, this is a safety mechanism saying, I disapprove of this part of myself, some part of myself that's related to that part that I'm projecting onto the other person. Oh, that person, look at them, they're dishonest, or look at them, they're lazy, or look at them. Whenever you find yourself making these value judgments about people, know that that's coming from inside of you, right? That's part of you. Now, this is not to say that we open ourselves up and stop using discernment around people's behavior. If somebody is being dishonest towards you, if somebody is being intentionally harmful to you, if somebody is, you have every right to stop that behavior. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, I can say that that behavior is not okay, and I can still accept you as a person even though you're doing something I don't like. So another key here is to get into forgiveness, but part of that forgiveness is forgiving yourself. Let's say somebody has done something to hurt me and I have hurt feelings about over that. Well, I might go through a process of forgiveness where I consciously say things like, okay, I'm holding on to this feeling. I'm holding on to some anger, some hurt, some grief from this person doing this behavior. First of all, I want to forgive myself for holding on to those painful emotions. Okay, so I forgive myself first. Now I forgive that person, which is I decide that that harmful feeling from that person's behavior, I don't want to carry that around anymore. I want to let go of that. And I know that can be really challenging, particularly if somebody's been abusive or particularly harmful to you. I know that can be a challenge, but the work is worth it. It's worth it to, you know, let go of that emotional charge. Now, that does not mean, forgiveness does not mean that I'm going to let that person harm me again, that I'm going to let them repeat those behaviors. It's a really, really important distinction. Forgiving and forgetting are two different things. Okay, we don't always have to forget. I can forgive somebody and not let them back in my life. I can forgive somebody and not let them harm me again, or, you know, not give them necessarily their way from, oh, you should forgive me so that I can go back to doing these harmful things. I'm going to forgive you, but I'm not going to let you go back to doing those harmful things because, you know, I don't want to feel that way anymore and it's not okay, right? So we can put boundaries around behavior while still forgiving and accepting the other person. So let's get into self forgiveness. So the three tools I've given you, and there are many, many more. The three tools I've given you: one, look at the things about you that drive you crazy. You can also look at any hidden shame you have. Look at the things about other people that drive you crazy, and then particularly when we're casting judgments, I'm judging that person is lazy, dishonest, guilty. When we're casting these negative judgments, there is something about ourselves that we haven't accepted. Okay, and then look at getting triggered. Look at what's, the kinds of things that are triggering us, And, that's some kind of wounding that's coming up from inside us. And the last thing I'll tell you that I think is a really good thing to look at and to journal and to write down is, what are your secret desires? What are your hidden desires? The things that you might not ever act out on. And again, this does not mean you need to act out on them, okay? Particularly if your secret desires, your hidden desires, your things that you think are shameful involve harming somebody else, you wouldn't want to do that. But the desire has a positive intention, whether it is to make you feel good or feel more powerful or feel, safer or whatever that is. Just acknowledge those parts of yourselves, and like the stuff that you in the beginning that drove you crazy about yourself, acknowledge your secret desires and say, thank you for wanting that for me. You know, and that maybe the secret desire is something you might act out on. Oh, I have a secret desire to learn to play the piano, but my family told me I couldn't carry a tune and I'll never be musical. Maybe it is. Maybe it's okay. Maybe now is the time for you to say, you know what? I don't care what anybody said to me in the past. I'm going to go learn to play the piano. Okay. So secret desires don't have to be salacious. They don't have to be harmful. They can be just stuff that we have locked away. All right, with that, I'm going to leave you for today. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell so you know. I do a lot of things live, and you might want to jump on when I'm live someday if you ever have questions or want to interact. I will talk to you real soon. I love to you all. Take care.